This is our Zoom-in session with producer Deniese Davis. Thank you so much for everyone being here today. Deniese is an alum of Brooklyn College, and she has quite a bit of experience, obviously being a producer, working with Issa Rae on several different projects and TV shows. And we're going to get to learn a little bit more about her. So I'm glad that everyone is here. There are Brooklyn College students here, and I think there are non-Brooklyn College, maybe some CUNY students here from other schools. So if you are from another CUNY school, let us know in the chat. We'd like to know who you are and where you're zooming in from. So we're going to interview Deniese in just a few minutes, and we're going to get to learn about her. I just want to make a couple of quick announcements. So I want to thank the film department and the Fierstein Graduate School of Cinema for co-hosting this and promoting it to students. We really do appreciate that. And there are several of our faculty and members that are here. So again, if anybody, faculty and students have questions, you can add that to the chat and we will touch upon all those questions as we go on. We have a series of questions that we're going to ask Deniese, and we're going to go through those. I want to thank Trem as well, which I believe shared this event as well. Trem is TV, radio, and emerging media, so thank you. I also want to introduce Raquel Marino. She is our college assistant at Magner Center. She just recently graduated. She's going to help us go through all the questions here, facilitate questions in the chat. And she also, congratulations, got into the NBC Page program, which is not an easy thing to do, but that is a great accomplishment. And for students that don't know about the NBC Page program, it is open to recent grads. So definitely put that on your radar. It's a really great program, so keep that in mind. Okay, so we are going to jump right in because I know that there are a lot of questions, I'm sure, from the students that are here. We have several questions as well. So Deniese Davis has been our go-to mentor for a couple of years now. She has spoken with students, shared advice, explained her career path and what she's doing in the industry, and we always are super appreciative of that. And I'll email her every once in a while, every couple of months. I got another one for you. You want to speak with them, and Deniese has always been very accommodating, and we really appreciate that. And you're back here again to speak with our students, and we're really eager to learn a little bit more about you and your career path. So welcome to our Zoom session, and we're gonna get started. Tell us a little bit about yourself, why you chose the entertainment industry, and what did you study here at Brooklyn College?
Oh man, well first thank you guys so much for having me. It's kind of surreal just because sometimes I forget how old I am. Everything feels like it happened yesterday. Yeah, I mean, look, I love doing this. Brooklyn College is a very, very special place in my own story, in my journey. It's really where it all started for me. So I'm just really excited to talk to you all. So I guess to kick it off, gosh, where do I start? It's a two-pronged approach. I started dabbling in video production in high school. I'm born and raised in Las Vegas. For those of you who don't know, Las Vegas, Nevada. So not really an industry there. And I ended up taking a class my junior year, was exploring, shooting things, editing, and really just learning these random skill sets that I had no context of because I didn't know anyone who had worked in the entertainment industry. I didn't really know what career endeavors you can kind of pursue. But when it came time for college, I realized I could go to school for film, and honestly, I never thought about it. I hadn't thought about it as a degree, and like I said, or as a career. So it was really intriguing, and I got excited about studying something that I was interested in, and was like, again, already playing around in, and was like, well, that sounds cool. But the other side to my story is that I always wanted to live in New York. I'm sure that's like a lot of people. I just growing up in Vegas, I just really wanted a different experience, and I felt like the farthest away you can get from home from Vegas. So I tell the story all the time. NYU was my dream school, as it is for many people, which is ironic now because I would have never fit in there. But it was, you think of New York and you think of film school, and that's the first place that pops in mind. And I had applied and did early admissions, didn't get in, and was devastated. I actually was like, how am I going to go to New York? That was it. That was the opportunity, and really didn't know about what other options existed. And it was actually my mother, once I had graduated high school that summer, I love New York so much, and I visited that part of my graduation present was I got to go back. I had an aunt who lived in Brooklyn, so I went back to spend 2 weeks with her. And while I was there, my mom called and said, "Have you heard of this school called Brooklyn College?" And I was like, "No, what is it?" And she said, "Well, apparently they have a campus and they have a film program, and why don't you go down and check it out while you're there?" Because it's funny when you learn about college, but she was like, they're kind of doing rolling admissions that they're said. I was like, well, how? Because, normal college, it doesn't accept it. And she was like, no, it's like a public college. So anyways, took the 2 train, went down to the campus. I will say the first thing that I immediately took to was the fact that there was a campus. I think you think of New York City and you think of colleges like NYU, and they're so baked into the fabric of the buildings where you get off that 2 train in Flatbush and you see this brick, beautiful, historic, true, real college campus, right? That fully exceeded my expectations of what I was coming into. And after I kind of walked the grounds for a little bit, I called my mom and said, I think this feels great. If they have a film program, let's do it. And she was like, great, because I've already applied. So I was like, all right. And I came back to Vegas in August and had my admissions letter waiting for me. And I packed up and bought my plane ticket. And 2 weeks later, found myself on the BC campus. And so that's really how I got there. And, really was, like I said, a stroke of luck of something that I didn't expect to be in. But once I got started, it truly was one of those things where I can't see myself having been anywhere else. I really fell in love with the programs and the classes and the things that, we'll talk about later. But with that, the last thing I'll add about producing in the entertainment industry is, I majored in film production, and I decided to minor in TV radio. So I really, from the beginning, was taking a series of both classes, right? You take your general ed classes, but I knew that I wanted to see both experiences because I didn't know yet what I wanted to do. But my freshman year, as I started just learning little bits about what all of the crew members and the people that consist of a film set, there was something about the role of a producer that just spoke to me. It really was the thing that felt like, oh, I could do this. I tend to say that part of the reason why I gravitated towards it more than any other role was because it is a job that is involved in everything, which I love. There is nothing that I felt like I had to choose in terms of like, oh, you just do writing or you just do editing or you just direct. I love that you are a part of the inception all the way through the release and really able to participate in that. And to add, it's creative, but it's also business. It's a people person job, right? It was something that just from a personality standpoint, I was like, I could do this. And so I had it in my mind that yeah, at some point in my 4 years at BC, I would navigate it and hopefully one day become a producer. But I didn't know really what that meant in terms of like, what are those steps? And so I really focused on school first. And sorry, Michael, I'm rambling. But the last thing I'll add that I think is important as we move on is, my decision to become a producer and major and minor in these 2 areas led me to go, okay, I'm in New York City. It's not Hollywood, but there's a lot of media entities here, right? New York is still very much a mecca. So what opportunities and experiences can I seek out that would at least help inform the type of producer I wanted to be and kind of how I wanted to look at my career post school. So I ended up getting my first internship fall of my freshman year, which was really early for a student to go out to be interning. And it was literally a stroke of luck of meeting some people at a party I went to with my aunt, and they owned a video production company, very 3-man operation where they were doing branded content videos for like J-Lo's clothing line and Nietzsche, like very old school. This is like mid 2000s. So they were like, do you want to come intern for us? And they're the ones who taught me editing. But from there, I realized what internship experiences can bring, and I kind of soaked that up. And I then parlayed that into later in the 4 years at Brooklyn College. I ended up with 10 paid internships and 1 unpaid internship. So just to give you a snapshot again of just how serious I was and how much I was just hungry, which I think, again, I talk about all the time because I say when you're a student, it's like take advantage of those because obviously, as you'll see, a lot of those relationships and true work experiences, I really did apply and bring that back into the classroom in a lot of ways. So there's that. I don't know where you want to go from there.
There's a lot of really great advice right there alone. All right. You talked about the courses that you had taken. And I'm assuming maybe business of film might have been one of your really liked. And the fact that you said 10 internships?
Well, really 11, but I was broke and young, and I was like, it's either get a part-time job or get a paid internship. And so I was like, well, I'm going to go and try to get these paid internships so I don't have to get a job. And I ended up with 10. And people are always like, how did you get 10 paid internships? And I'm like, well, I applied to 50 and I got 4 interviews. And usually I always got the one job. It was very rare for me to be able to get 2 jobs and get to choose what experience I did, but I really threw out a very broad blanket of, well, what's just in media, right? And so just to give you a snapshot, I interned from, I was with the Blue Man Group and their in-house video production team one semester. I was at The View at ABC, the talk show, one semester. Once you got into the ABC realm, it was really easy to bounce around. So I also did the last Hoorae at the time. I interned in the executive office of programming for daytime for ABC, and doesn't even exist anymore because daytime has gone away. But interned for like a small literary manager who shared an office with Ann Carey and Ted Hope, these true pioneers in independent producing, right? So when I say I just was like rolling the dice and saying, you know what, I just want an internship in this medium, I'm not going to be picky about what it is, just give me exposure. And I think the biggest takeaway for me was that, oh, there's so many different types of jobs. Like I knew I wanted to be a producer, but I started to realize and be exposed to just how many different careers you could really have within the entertainment industry as a whole, right? The one unpaid internship that I took was with BET one summer. They didn't pay their interns, but I was like, well, it's BET. This feels like an amazing, different network experience that I hadn't gotten. So I did it anyway. So, but it just gives you an idea of, like I said, the randomness of the experiences, but I still really took so much out of every single one of those. And again, as I'm complementing that with going to school full time,
Right. That was probably, I'm sure, a challenge in itself too, right? Being able to balance that and school.
Yeah.
But we tell students, right, internships. Like, so for any students that are here that haven't done an internship, and you still have the opportunity to do an internship, you should. And, internships are your way of making an informed decision about a career. So you had said randomness, but it's also variety.
Yeah, that's
Right?
true.
It's a variety of different opportunities within the industry. So, and of course, as a producer, the more that you saw from the production side, post-production editing, and then some of these other places too, right? You were able to, get this variety of experience, which of course, your resume must, obviously your resume, before you graduated, or when you graduated, was your resume like 2 or 3 pages at that point?
No, I used to always try to keep it down to a page, but it was impressive. I mean, I must say now looking back, I randomly, guys, talking about a trip down memory lane. I don't know how, but I found this email where I was applying to an internship and I read the cover letter and I was like, wow. Wow, I was really putting myself out there. Just because it's so ironic, like you said, of how determined I was. And then to look at that resume and see what I was able to do just in those 4 years, I walked away starting a resume that literally had restaurant jobs from the part-time jobs I had in Vegas in high school to, the 4 years in Brooklyn, not necessarily saying, I think I might have PA'd for a music video once or twice, right? So I had these 2 PA credits and then 10 internship experiences. And so it did in a lot of ways make it feel like, I was getting additional information and was setting myself above, the average 22-year-old that's coming out, and just trying to figure out what they wanted to do. And I do think deciding in school what the end goal was for me is really what helped, because I tend to think that I got a lot of these internships because I would show up for the interviews saying, I don't want to, like, to be honest, I'm not here to kiss your ass and get a job. I'm really here to work and work hard and learn from you and hopefully build a relationship. And I think people respected that, because so often I think students go and get internships thinking that, or expecting that it's supposed to give them a job offer at the end of it. And it does work sometimes, right? But for me, it wasn't about that. I knew that these internships were for something else for me. And I think that also helped, because it wasn't like, they understand that I was there to do the work at the end of the day.
Were there any internships in particular that you found probably the most important, or you got the best kind of experience from? Does any internship stand out?
Yeah, the one I'm about to tell you surprises everybody, but I took an internship. I was a video production intern for the Girl Scouts of America, the corporate office. And it was, going, I was like, I don't know what this internship is, but I met the woman who ran it. And essentially, it was with the research department. There was a Black woman who was the lead researcher. And she basically explained that they were doing a very special new research project that they wanted to study young girls, young Girl Scouts in certain areas of the Midwest and actually show the corporate side of Girl Scouts what it was actually like to be a real girl at that time, because they felt like the program wasn't actually providing them with the skills and the things that they needed for life. And so I was like, well, where's the video production coming from? And she was like, well, one thing that we wanted to do and try was basically capture a document with the research team that aligns with a bunch of questions and things we want to get to know about their lives, and complement that by sending them flip cameras and allowing them to document their lives on a day-to-day basis and interview themselves and just kind of shoot almost their own mini documentary on their lives and send us back footage. And then my job was to teach the girls how to use the cameras, get the footage back, compile it, and then I would edit. I ended up editing a 30-40 minute documentary that coincided with their research that they were pulling and the data. And it was so like fulfilling. Obviously it was paid, so there's that, right? But then at the same time, the reason why it stands out and was my favorite internship is because it was the first one that felt like I had a job in a true way. Like I had real responsibilities. I wasn't there just shadowing or just like doing busy work. It was like, here's your role in this larger part. And it really did feel like I was giving back. I mean, I got to go to Detroit at the time because, all of the interns got to actually fly to some of the cities, and I ended up going to Detroit. The other interns got to go to St. Louis, and, so even to be able to get an all expenses paid trip as an intern to a different city I'd never been to and get to meet some of these girls I had been communicating with via video conferences and phones. And yeah, I really just felt like it was a special project that I was more than just an intern for. And I walked away with so much that I learned from that, and so much that I took away just from an emotional standpoint that I still carry with me, because it was, the documentary side of things are just so interesting. And it was something different that, again, you would never expect as a film student to be like, oh, I'm going to go edit a doc for a research team for Girl Scouts. What? But again, you just apply to jobs. I was like, video production intern, Girl Scouts, who cares? Here's my resume. And then that's what the job was. So that's what I meant about just being open-minded about the opportunities you're seeking out, because you really don't know what they're going to give you or what they're about until you get in the door.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point about some of these internships and what you can leverage from it, what you learn from it. And then, we're always telling students, again, take a look at what you did at the internship and leverage that on your resume big time, and you did that. And I'm glad that we asked that question, because again, it's a really great insight into, because sometimes students are like, well, I'm not sure what I want to do exactly. Because as creatives, right, we have all these interests, you're not sure, what you want to do. You want to be the director one day, you want to be a producer one day, but getting all that experience in all these different areas and just focusing in on the thing that you really enjoyed. And again, the video editing, I mean, that's really great. And it's a great story too. So the more opportunities that everybody applies to, the better. What led to your decision to move out to LA? And
Yeah. So this is so funny. So Brooklyn College, the Feinstein program did not exist when I graduated. I graduated in 2010. So I think it came a few years later. So there was no graduate school program attached to BC. And some days I wonder if there was, had I stayed. But essentially, I graduated Brooklyn College in 4 years, majored in film, minored in TV radio. And again, I knew all those years that I truly wanted to focus on producing. But when I graduated, even with all of these internship experiences and having done my thesis film and having helped produce other people's short films, I was like, I still don't feel like I'm confident in fully grasping what a producer does. And I know that, BC allowed me to learn a big blanket of the industry, but not specifically just producing, and I was hungry to be able to just focus on that. And I love school. I wasn't afraid of it in terms of what it provides, and I embraced the learning opportunities. And so when I discovered that you can go to graduate school for film, but in graduate school you just focus on one concentration, I thought, oh, that's interesting. Like, would I be open to going to grad school just for producing? and allowing myself to just learn about that. And I also knew that at some point over the years in college that like LA was the Mecca, and the truth is there's just more opportunities here because the businesses ran here compared to a place like New York. And so I said I hated LA growing up, but I was like, okay, well, let's be honest. Either I have to figure out LA early in my life, or at some point later I'll explore it, right? But I didn't just want to go get a job. I really wanted to learn about producing. So I combined all of that and said, why don't I apply to graduate school programs only in LA that are focused on producing? And if I get in, then there's my ticket to LA. I don't have to move there. I don't have to find a job. I don't have to sleep on people's couches. I will go to LA for 2 years of school and see if I like it, you know? And then worst case scenario, I end up with a master's degree. I can always move back to New York, and I can always figure it out from there. But it really was about, you know, trying to put myself in the middle of it and seeing what would happen. I ended up applying to, again, story of my life, the USC START program, which is a very prestigious producing program for graduate school. And I also applied to the American Film Institute for an MFA in producing. And START was my first choice, mostly because there is a book that I had gotten my freshman year in college that I still have that's called So You Want to Be a Producer. And it was written by Lawrence Herbert, who chairs the START program. So this was like my Bible in undergrad, where I was like, START is where it's at, the producing program for grad school. This is where I'm gonna be. This is how it's all gonna align. And I didn't get in, of course. And but I got into AFI, and I remember going, what? Oh, I didn't really do my research so much on this school, but I mean, I got in, and I'm not going to turn down that opportunity. So I came to LA, and I came immediately after undergrad when I graduated that summer and started the program. And that's important because I was really young. I was one of the youngest producers in that program. I later realized that, you know, a lot of graduate schools, there's not a lot of people who go straight from undergrad to grad school. They usually take some time off. They go and have a life, especially FI. Like there's like people who were in their 30s and 40s with kids who are coming back to just focus on this one thing. And here I was 22 being like, I'm going to be a producer. But, you know, I do give a lot of credit to that graduate experience. It's 2.5 years because it was exactly what I was looking for. And to be able to just build a skill set just only in producing, and to be able to actually physically produce things in that program, and again, and explore LA and make relationships here. I mean, to be honest, everything that led up to that once I graduated in 2012 is what I feel like helped me launch my career on a faster track than most people, which we can talk about later. But that's how I ended up here. And again, it was just taking chances. And if I hadn't got in, I don't think it would have been meant for me. I probably would have stayed in New York, right? But it was just like, I mean, if I get in, then that's what I'm doing. If I don't, then I'll figure something else out.
Right. No, that's a really good point. And you know, again, the industry is about taking chances and risks, right? So it's good that you did that, and then you gained the experience and you went out to LA. And if nobody here has been to LA yet, definitely consider traveling out there and seeing how it is. You know, and again, it's we do have quite a few Brooklyn College alum that are actually in LA as well. So I think Raquel's going to ask the next question here.
Yeah, so forwarding a little bit more to your recent works, and how did it come to meeting Issa Rae, and what was it like working with her, and the misadventures of an awkward Black girl, and as well as Insecure and all the other works you've ended up being able to work on?
Yeah, so what's ironic is when I graduated AFI in 2012, you know, a lot of the producing that I learned there was very hands-on. I'd like to think that I learned all of the skill sets of being a line producer, to be honest. And what I recognized was that every project, every set, pretty much anything with the budget always hires a line producer. There's always creative producers, but you always still need a line producer. You need someone who's going to run production. And I was good at that. I was good at what I learned at AFI. So why that matters is because when I was getting ready to graduate, and it was like, okay, now what? I recognized that there was a couple different paths of entry-level positions and ways in, and you know, you can go be an assistant, you can go work at an agency. That is very traditional. But for me, I was like, Oh, I have the skill set as a line producer, as someone who can go produce things for other people. And at that time, if you think about 2011, 2012, digital exploded. There was all this money being pumped into the web in terms of all of these YouTube channels and all these new companies for the first time who were actually investing in digital content. And I was seeing a lot of my peers go and get hired in these freelance jobs to go make those. And so I was like, well, that sounds more exciting. And that actually, sounds like I'd be doing real producing work. This assistant route, not that I have an ego, but I think after maybe 12 internships, I was like, I don't really want to start there. This feels like a 20-year journey to become the producer I want to be. So why don't I'm only 24, so why don't I go take a couple years and continue to be broke, and just apply to some freelance jobs and go get more true work experience. And so that decision, as I'm, literally approaching AFI's graduation date, I just started applying to, everything from Craigslist to Mandy to you name it, but to these random like producer gigs, people that were like, music video, need a producer, send your resume. And so, you can imagine with these internships and with all of these additional job experiences through AFI and undergrad, I had production experience, so I was applying saying, here are the budget levels I'd worked in. And one of the jobs that I applied to happened to be it was a random email that was like a line producer for a hit web series. And I applied to that job and I got an email back from Issa Rae and that night. And she said, can you meet the next morning? And I met her and it turned out to be for Awkward Black Girl. I always joke and say I was living under a film school rock because I hadn't discovered the first season. I hadn't known really what was happening, but I did my homework. And when I showed up for the meeting, I was a huge fan within 24 hours, just being like, oh, wait a second, the content that you're doing, I just realized I haven't seen yet. I've been in school for 6 years and I'm not even doing content like this as a Black queer woman. Like this is crazy. I'm like, how are you doing this? First of all, what's this job for? And it ended up being that she was looking for a producer to step in on Awkward Black Girl, the second season. She had already shot 3 or 4 episodes of that season. They had lost their producer and really needed someone to step in right away. So, I advocated for myself, and that night she emailed me and said, you got the job, can you start next week? And I jumped in headfirst into producing the rest of that season for her, and that began the start of a really, really wonderful partnership and relationship with her that has spawned, 9 years now, which is wild. But the snapshot recoil of my career from there was, I spent 3.5 years as a freelance producer, so I would continue to work with Issa on a bunch of things. We did sketches and podcasts, you name it. She would call me and say, can we do this for $500? I'd be like, you bet we can. We're going to figure it out. And we really just had fun, growing together and just going and making stuff. And when I wasn't working with Issa, which is what I considered like my passion projects at the time, because I wasn't really getting paid for it, the way I was keeping the lights on was, still freelance producing, but in music videos and other digital content. I did a lot of shorts, so things that were actually paying the bills. And I did that for a few years, and up until 2015, when the Insecure pilot was greenlit, and it was Issa who made sure that the door was open for me to come join the pilot with her, and actually became the assistant on the Insecure pilot, which was very exciting, and a demotion in some ways, if you can look at it, but it was a demotion that I was gladly accepting because I was like, I'm not going to turn down this opportunity. And I was able to prove myself, where then when the show got picked up, there was no problem when Issa was like, I want Denise to be a producer on this. I had proven myself, and everyone was like, hell yeah, she can be a producer. And so I've been a producer on the show ever since. I've worked my way up. I'm now a co-EP on this final season that we just wrapped. And, the second part to the story is Issa got an HBO deal in the first season, which allowed her for overhead for her company. And she turned around and offered me a full-time job and was like, do you want to start freelancing? And I was like, yes. So I took the opportunity. And with that, we ended up developing and doing Black Lady Sketch Show. I've been able to help develop and sell a lot of projects, do a lot of different things with her. And then most recently, I've decided to step out on my own and launch my own company this year, which is both scary and exciting. But that's been my journey. And, there's a lot of little things in between there, but that just gives you guys a snapshot of where it all started. Because it's very surreal sometimes. I know it's not how it works for everyone, but I like to think that every single person who ends up in this town, in this industry, has their own journey. It truly is nothing alike for any one person in terms of how they make it in.
Right. So it's never like a point A to point B type of path.
No. It's always, I mean, look, I joke and say in film school, of course, but I was like, I'm going to make the independent films of the world. I'm going to go win Oscars. I'm going to go make these beautiful films. I still haven't made a film. I'm just like, how I end up in TV? I somehow stumbled in television first. But that's okay because I know films are coming. But it just, yeah, being open-minded to the journey and being like, you know what? I'm going to jump into this opportunity head first, even if I don't know where it's going to take me, right? And just making sure that I was always doing a gut check about where I wanted to go and knowing and thinking about if that opportunity would help along the way.
Yeah. I mean, you were able to build such a great resume, and again, just all the experiences that you've had. And I remember when I was doing research about Issa too, about her, the YouTube, and she took advantage of YouTube, and it was like a do-it-yourself, right? DIY, do it yourself. So, throughout this entire pandemic, I've told students like one of the things that they should be doing is working on their own projects, right? So, and do you feel like to this day still, I mean, with YouTube and so many other like digital platforms, do you still think that's something that students should be doing?
Oh, completely. I mean, we're living in fully different time, even from when I was coming up, where it's so much more of a thing to not have to wait around and wait for the opportunities, but to be able to create it yourself, right? And so if you're looking for experience and you're like, oh, I really want to produce something, well, it's so easy to go and find collaborators to go and make something with, right? It's so easy to go shoot something on an iPhone if you wanted to. So what's stopping you from just saying, let's just figure it out? Because that's also part of, it's like part of the journey, to be honest. Like sometimes to wait for the opportunity to come to you, you might be waiting a while, but if you start to generate the opportunities yourselves, I think you'll start to notice that at some point it'll start to evolve and just lead to other things, to be honest.
Yeah. Do you have, in terms of the responsibilities of being a producer, do you want to go into some detail about what that is like as a producer, what your day-to-day is like, or what some of your daily challenges are like?
Oh, it's too long. I mean, it's interesting that one of the fascinating things about producing is that it's never the same day to day. It's just not. I like to think of myself sometimes as like a project manager, or I call myself like an entrepreneur who tells stories because it's like these two parts to producing. There's this part about almost running a business, right? You have a production company, you have to make sure it makes money, you have to make sure people are paid, you have to make sure that your slate of projects are basically your product at the end of the day, right? So you always have to make sure that that is something is happening there. So I do a lot of, one part of my day to day is that project management. It's development, giving notes, selling shows, taking meetings, getting to know new writers, right? Making sure that the wheels of my company are always going. Now, then there's this whole other side to it that kind of maybe coincides more with production, as you will, which is, now you're shooting something and you're on set and you're putting out fires, you're problem solving, you're making sure everyone is happy, making sure you don't go off budget. I mean, I just spent all day yesterday doing a bunch of production work and these interviews for something we've been doing that was super exhausting. And here I was next to the director throwing out questions to our subjects, and helping us like make sure that we're getting all the information we need to later tell the story in the edit. So, again, no day is the same. And it's actually what I love about my job is that, this is where the entrepreneurial part comes in, is that I don't have a 9 to 5. I don't clock in and clock out in my role. Now that I'm in my own company too, I am my own boss, which is good and bad. I have to be a little bit more stern with myself sometimes about getting things done and doing it in a timely manner. But that's I think the challenge that excites me is that it's up to me. It's the responsibility falls on me as a producer. And the last thing I'll say is I always say this, the producer is almost like a CEO. So it's like everyone's coming to you for answers. You are the linchpin. Like if I don't respond to an email about this script, well, that script doesn't go anywhere, right? It's like you have to keep things moving, and that falls on you at the end of the day because people are looking to you to lead and to carry things through. And that's really cool. I've been able to collaborate and meet with so many amazing, really dope creative like talent, whether they were writers or filmmakers. And yes, there's a small group of people that I tend to work with all the time and repeatedly, but then there's always new collaborators that I'm finding, which is also really cool too. It's like you don't have to be in an office setting seeing the same faces every day. You get to just like switch it up when you want to.
In terms of the cast members, do any of the cast members pitch ideas for some stories, and how does that go about?
Undoubtedly so. I mean, every cast member, every person in this business is creative in some retrospect. What's really interesting, even on a show like Insecure, is that the majority of our cast members have become creators, producers in their own rights. And so, we tend to talk about projects amongst ourselves or different things we're doing or things we want to work on together outside of this one. But for the most part, there's no formal pitches happening. There's a moment in this industry where you realize how much relationships matter and how much they really get you in the door and move opportunities, right? So, for example, if Jay Ellis and I sat down and was like, "Oh, let's go do a movie together," like we find a script and we're just gonna go make that movie, right? There's no formal like let's talk about it. You have to set time with my assistant. It's like I know you, you know me, I love you, you love me. We're gonna go work together, right? And that's really how those relationships work out for the better. And if anything, Raquel, it's like, it's less of the cast has actually not pitched me as much as we talk about projects. They tend to actually come to me all the time for advice. Like they'll be like, "Hey, I'm doing my own project. I'm hiring this director. What do you think? Is this right?" Like, Denise, in your producing experience, because they're navigating their own careers, and we're using each other as a support system. So I tend to not get pitches as much as actually get a lot of inquiries for them wanting to pick my brain or wanting to ask questions, or they'll call and say, "Will you meet with this young writer?" And things like that. So that's really more or less where we collaborate.
Do you have a favorite episode that you've ever produced?
Let me choose.
Uh-huh.
This is a two-parter. I really loved our Coachella episode of Insecure, which is in season 3. I think it's episode 4. I love it the most because it's so beautifully shot. It's one of the funniest episodes I think we've ever done. But if you really got to know the making of it, we fully recreated Coachella. That we didn't go there. Like that is fake. So it's one of those really crown achievements of like, I look back now and I'm like, how do we do this? Like Ferris wheel was visual effects. It's very intense when you think about what was real and what wasn't, and how we really leaned into the specificity and still pulled it off, right? There were so many people that were still like, "What do you mean you didn't go to Coachella?" And we were like, "We did not." I mean, we went to Coachella and we scouted Coachella, and then we came back and built it. But it was shot here in LA in some polo field. That was just like a big patch of green grass with 500 extras. Like, don't ask me how we did it, but that experience is my favorite to know how intense and stressful it was making it, but then to see the results, right? And to be able to really see the hard work and dedication pay off. So by far, favorite episode produced, but then I'd add to that that the pilot of the show was also really special to me because at the time, especially in 2015, doing the pilot, no show had ever been out there like it. And, it was a lot of first times for us. It was my first time, Issa's first time, Melina Matsoukas' first time, Prentice's first time show running. And we really went in and set out to make the show we all wanted to make, even despite the traditional norms of what you normally would put into a TV pilot. And to, again, see the end result of that work, which was us being like, "Oh, wait, it's not, that's how this is usually done for TV? Well, that's fine. But we still want to do it this way." And really being able to push the boundaries, I think is what ended up resulting in this incredible show that has just evolved and grown from that point, right? And so this pilot, for many ways, maybe because it was my first TV experience, will always be one of my favorite episodes to produce because I was like learning by doing it at that time.
Right. Okay, so I mean, again, you were able to choose though. I mean that.
Well, yeah, there's others in there, but those stand out. Those for sure stand out. I mean, also maybe because for Coachella, we did get to go to Palm Springs for 2 days, like as a crew, which fully wild. They should have never sent us there. But a lot of the things like the pool scenes, like, we did end up going in the 7-Eleven scene. So we did end up going to Palm Springs for a weekend to shoot all of the non-Coachella Palm Springs work that you see. So that's real, I should mention. And, there's nothing like being in a production and getting a free trip out of it. I mean, it's the best. No different than how we all got to go to Mexico in season 4 to shoot that Mali, Mexico episode. That was fun to be in Mexico for a week and be like, I'm here for work.
Right, absolutely. So do you have any tips for students to, that don't have a lot of experience working on set, or do you want to talk a little bit about what it's like to be on set and, any kind of tips that you can give students?
On-set experience is really important. Even if you're like, I know I don't want to have anything to do with that and I want to go be a development exec, or I want to go, work at a studio or network, I think it's imperative for anyone, especially while you're still a student, to get exposure and observe just how things are made, right? Because there is a language to it. There is a way that it works that, as you grow into your careers, you'll start to feel left behind is not the word, but there might be a point in your career, in 10 years from now where you do have to go to set for whatever reason, maybe on behalf of your company. And it is very scary, or like, what's the word that I've been talking to people about? It's almost like there's this level of comfortability because you're like, this is so new, right? You're like seeing these people and they're dragging all this random equipment around and people were saying things in walkies that you're like, what does that mean? And there's this true language of being on set that I think will just go a long way to have the basics down. And you can learn the basics very quickly just from spending a few days on a set. So I just think it's imperative, and it's also the other side to this industry where people don't even think about those careers. They don't think about they're an artist and that they can go grow and become a production designer. They can be an on-set set decorator or dresser. They can be in props and helping to make props and the things that people touch, right? And you start to be exposed to, again, hundreds. I mean, we had a 600-person cast and crew this season for Insecure. So it's like hundreds of job opportunities just from working on set. And you're not going to know what those jobs are and whether or not your own skill sets and interests may apply to one of those until you're exposed. And so I just think it's just, it goes a long way just in terms of someone who's still trying to navigate where they fit in all of this, and knowing that, there may be something on that side that you may take to. So I always say, especially as a student, milk your student status. I mean, you guys see how I took advantage of these internships just to get a lay of the land and kind of give me a head start. But with that comes so much, right? There's internships, but there's like discounts at festivals where you can do networking. There's discounts on almost anything. I actually hated that I graduated because I was like, I can't get the student fees anymore. Like, those were clutch. You got to pay it. It's like being an adult now and having to pay like things at whole cost, which is scary because you're still like, trying to make a living. So milk your student status and know that it can get you so much farther than you think, because people do want to help, especially when you're still learning. And again, set may not be for you, but the only way you're going to find out is to go and dabble in it and spend a day or two and say, yeah, I don't like this very much. So I just encourage everyone to explore it early on, because I think it informs so much about how the sausage is made.
Do you want to talk a little bit about your work with ColorCreative and Reform Media Group?
Sure. I realized I didn't bring up ColorCreative. That's a first. So ColorCreative is a company that Issa and I started together in 2014. Initially started as like this initiative where we wanted to go and produce and make these pilots, these independent television pilots for the web, but do it in a way that provided opportunities for first-time writers and directors, and really allow their work to be made and seen, because we recognize that a lot of aspiring writers very rarely actually see their work get made at an early stage in their career, right? It usually takes years to develop and sell a show and one day see it be executed. So why not create some type of program that allowed to do it on a low budget indie scale, but really provided an experience for everyone a part of it. So that's how we started, on the backs of 3 indie comedy pilots. We shot that summer, and the company grew and evolved. We ended up doing various partnerships with other companies and, always providing opportunities, mostly designed for writers. And over the years, very quickly, Issa and I realized we were basically doing the work as managers in a lot of ways. We weren't managers, but someone was like, you guys are discovering talent, you're providing opportunities, you're getting them representation, you're sending them out to the world, and you are helping to launch people's careers. And we were like, oh, really? Well, when you say it like that, yeah, I guess we are. And it dawned on us, just again, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, well, why couldn't we maybe explore management as a real thing? And, when we looked at the landscape of the business, at least at that time, there were no Black-owned management companies. A lot of them had been established and ran to this day by majority white people. And we were like, well, if we're going to be fighting for an inclusive space, like maybe this needs to be a thing. And we started talking to writers and representation, and they were like, yeah, it's really hard to get someone on my team, whether they're an agent or manager, who is of color. They just don't really exist. And we did our own poll at the time, and we found that there was like, I don't know, only 18 people of color who were managers in this town. And most of the major literary companies at that time had one person of color. They might have 20 managers, but there was one that was actually someone with a different nationality. And that stuck with us. And we were like, okay, well, how do we do this? And for 3 or 4 years, we went down a lot of dead ends trying to figure out, like, how are we going to ever make this a reality? Like, also, we don't really know much about running a management business. And over time, by kind of sticking through it, we turned to what we did best, which was like, I guess we'll just do this ourselves. So in 2019, we hired a junior manager, someone who was really passionate and eager and been dying to move into representation, and hired her as a junior manager and signed our first 5 clients who took a bet on us. And with that stable with us, we went into 2020 saying, okay, now we just need to find like the person, because what we were very clear on was that Issa's not trying to be a manager. I was like, I'm just a producer. I don't want to run a management company. So let's go find somebody who has those aspirations, who's going to be good at it and can really kind of take the bones of what we're starting to lay out to the next level. And in the middle of the pandemic, of all things, we were still able to find that person. So a woman named Talitha Watkins, who was a motion picture agent at CAA, one of the few senior Black agents, took a chance on us and started with us last September. And since then, we've grown to 3 managers, 50 clients, and are still continuing to grow and evolve. And I'm just so proud and excited for that company and what it's been able to do, because obviously now we're in a completely different landscape of this town, and inclusion is really on the tips of everyone's tongues. And I think it's ironic that we were launching now that there's like 3 or 4 other management companies of color that exist now too. And so it really does feel like the timing was everything with this company and this brand. And now we're a part of this exciting movement. And that business has evolved in more ways than I can have ever imagined, and in a positive way. And then it's also nice because I kind of took a step back and I don't run that company day to day now that it is a management company, but I am still a partner and obviously an owner, and I still very much support, are involved in it. So anyways, that's the ColorCreative story. And to segue into that, I mentioned earlier that this year I launched my own company, right? So a lot of this is a result of the pandemic. I think when things shut down last March and April, when it was really, really slow, it was the first time that, for better or worse, I mean, it was 2020, right? So I had been out of college for 10 years. I'd been out of grad school for 8. And sometimes when you're in it, you don't ever stop to look up and see what you've done or the work you've done. And I realized, I was just like, I've been on this like hustle train. And for the first time, I reflected on like the things I've been able to do, and very, very proud of it. And again, just blew my mind to be like, this doesn't happen this fast. I recognize this. I'm on a 10-year journey that normally takes people 20 years to do. And with that in mind, Issa and I had been working together for so long, but I started to be cognizant that for most of my career, at least up until this point, and believe, I should mention that I purposely did this, right? Which is, I was always been kind of a producer for hire. I've always kind of put my services out there and said, I will execute anyone's vision. And that has gotten me in all these doors. That has gotten me all these work experiences. But if I really had to ask myself, well, what is it that you want to be doing when it's all said and done? And what is your legacy? It was like that gnawing feeling of like, what would it be like if I were to be a producer on my own for the first time, and step outside of this beautiful Issa bubble that is so protective, so shiny, so beautiful. And if I had it my way, I'd probably grow old and gray and never leave her side. But I had to be real with myself and say, but is that good for me? And is that challenging me for years to come? And am I just like playing it safe and starting to feel like whether or not I was being challenged anymore, because like Issa's career is just, it is a very cushion job that I could be very happy with and not ever have to like want to do anything else. But I knew maybe sooner than later that if there was ever a time to discover who I was as a producer in my own right, that maybe this is that time in my life. Maybe I've done just enough things that I feel like I can rest my laurels and have a foundation built around where if I stepped on my own, I'm not going to drop off the edge of the cliff or, there doesn't feel like, oh, I'm doing it too soon. So, one of the hardest decisions I ever had to make, but when I went to Issa, she fully supported it. And, I stayed with her through the rest of last year and started putting together what became Reform Media Group, because it was like, once I made the decision, I kind of had my oh shit moment, because I was like, oh wait, now what? What do I have to go do? I was like, I have to find out a company name. What am I gonna make at this company? What do I want it to produce? Do I want an agent? Do I want a deal? Like, you start to, again, entrepreneurial, like have to build my business, right? And I'm now starting all over from scratch, but doing it my way for me, which I don't think I anticipated how much harder that might be, because before, having a partner is so great, because I'd go to Issa and we'd get in arguments, we'd be like, let's do this or let's do that. I hated that script, I love this script. And now I'm having conversations with myself about this new company. There is no partner to help me manage and have us go back and forth with. And now it's just up to me. So I'm taking this leap of faith. Ironically, my last day with Issa was like January 1st, and 10 days later, I was on the set of Insecure, wrapping the last season. So in a lot of ways, I knew I had to get past shooting the season to fully embrace this next chapter of mine. And we just wrapped this last weekend, which I'm incredibly proud of and excited, because I was like, oh, now I get my life, because production takes up so much bandwidth that I'd say for 6 months, even though I've been in this new position, 80% of my time has been wrapped up with Insecure and getting that season finished. So, it was almost feeling like I'm doing all the business with my company and building a new slate, but truly around my production schedule, which is grueling. And I'm now excited to kind of look at the rest of this year and really double down on all of the things I want Reform to be, which for me is a lot of different things. And what I've decided on is, I'm multicultural at heart, and I don't want to just be pigeonholed or boxed into one type of stories, one type of genre, one type of audience. And so I'm really setting out to be ambitious here, but I was like, I want to build a company that does a little bit of everything, and that doesn't, if you see me produce a thriller, then next to a buddy comedy, next to a family This Is Us show, like that's just who I am, because at the end of the day, I just love good stories. And so that's what I'm setting out to do. And I'm like, I don't have any real answers yet, because it's like literally in the moment still being figured out, but I'm excited. And, I'd like to think that my career up until now, I've no idea how it was all going to play out. So I was like, well, I guess let's do another blind faith round here and see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, again, this goes back to the business of film apart, right? And just being an entrepreneur, and a lot of students, again, if you're going to be freelance video editor and you're going to be a writer, then the business side of it is something that people really need to think about, consider, and then eventually they can do what Denise, you did, which is kind of, create this company and be an entrepreneur for yourself. And that's what it is. And I'm always telling students about that. So you have to really think about the business aspect. I know a lot of people just want to be creative, but then there's the business side that has to be taken into consideration. I think Raquel has a question next here.
Yes. So now, as we started working remotely and are gradually going to go back in person, what kind of changes do you foresee happening for TV and film production in a post-COVID world?
Good question. I mean, coming off of production for the last 6 months during COVID, it was not fun. I mean, it was fun, don't get me wrong, it's like my family, but it was very bittersweet, especially it being the very final season of the series that has launched all of our careers, but to do it in a way where we were like, can't hug somebody, can't, wear your mask, like can't see your face. But what I recognized was a lot of the changes that have been applied to production itself, to compensate for COVID. And I hope, to be honest, that 90% of that doesn't exist in 2 years. And that's because there was so many restrictions about it that just sucked. Like you try to do a party scene and they're like 50 extras total, inside or out, doesn't matter where you are, that's all you get, because of like the body count constraints and the concerns that start to develop around having too many people in one space. And so imagine trying to figure out a party scene and going, I mean, I know there's supposed to be 300 people here, but we only get 50. So like, what do we want to do? And the good side to it was that, I mean, as a producer, we've never had more challenges, more problems to solve in terms of having to be creative about how we can still make this happen. But then the downside is that it did feel like it slowed things down. It did feel like, it was very grueling on our crew just to be able to have to adjust to these settings. And so, if I think about what in a post-COVID world, what's going to stick or what I hope continues, or what I see change, this is gonna sound really sad, but I'm like, I hope we still have hand washing stations. I mean, there's never been more hand washing stations on a set that weren't there before. And I promise you, I was like, where do these come from? Have we always had these? Why weren't these on set before? The fact that I can go and put my foot on a pump and wash my hands, before going back to set. It's those small things that you realize go a long way. But across the board, I mean, COVID is expensive. So just to give you guys a snapshot on an average production, no matter which way you look at it, your COVID costs that you're adding just to cover COVID and being safe are about 30%, 20 to 30% of your total budget, right? So if you're doing $1 million movie, you have to figure out how to add another $200,000 just to cover your COVID costs. That includes all the tests, that includes your COVID officers, that includes your PPE gear, right? And just like all of these things that go into COVID that, again, I hope do not exist because I think it's very taxing on a lot of low budget and smaller projects and productions, sometimes just from a cost factor alone. So it didn't really help answer your question, Raquel, but I do think just from a production standpoint, those are some of the things I've seen, and I hope they all go away.
Do you have any tips on what students could be doing right now to make themselves competitive as writers, producers, any kind of advice in that realm?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that always sticks out to me, and I know it feels maybe too premature, but I really do think sometimes in a college environment, in a student-like environment, it's so freeing to just be able to explore and experiment. And I think, so often you feel the pressures of like, I have to get a job post school, but sometimes you're still not sure what you want to do, right? And so taking advantage of, again, this environment that allows you to fail without having any remarks on who you are as a career because you're a student. It's okay to fail as a student, guys. You're still experimenting, you're still learning, right? There's no reason why the stakes should be high enough to feel like you have to succeed while you're in this environment. So within that, it's like really taking advantage to go look at everything, right? Whether it's like, I'm gonna go get a PA job on a music video, I'm gonna go get this internship, but again, take advantage of the student status, mostly to be exposed to everything. So that way, if you come out of college, you feel like you have an inkling of the end goal. And I just think it'll just help you navigate the industry a lot faster, because I can't tell you how many people then leave school and spend the rest of their 20s doing all of that work. Well, that to me could have been maximized and done faster while you were still a student, right? In terms of like going out for those opportunities because you just focused on school and didn't add anything else to other than the classroom experience. So now you have to go spend the next 5 or 6 years getting all those credits, being a PA, like, finding out what it looks like on set, finding out what a production office looks like. And it's like, that kind of stuff you can actually get a lot sooner, whether you realize it or not. So that's my advice, is taking advantage of the moment and, again, the resources that a school has to offer, right? Like you have a career center, you have people who can help you get those internships, help you find those jobs. When you're out of school, there's no HR for that. Like, sure, there's alumni councils, but they're not as involved or interactive as it is when you're a student, right? So that's what I mean by like really doubling down and saying, okay, well, I may not know exactly what I want to be doing, but how do I maximize the chance to discover the things that I could be doing while I'm still here? So when I graduate, I feel more confident moving forward in whatever role or end goal that I see for myself.
One person's asking, how do you get a script to a producer? What are any tips in terms of doing that? Do you have any tips on, like, if you're a screenwriter, how do you break through? Do you need the agent? Do you write a query letter? What is a query letter?
Yeah, I saw that question. Query letters don't really work, I'm gonna be honest. So essentially what this town thrives off of on the creative side, our relationships, our networking. It's the word that people hate to hear, right? But it's true. And I say that, and I'll give you an example, which is you're an emerging screenwriter. you have a couple scripts, you have maybe that one great script, and you're like, how do I get people to read this? How do I get this in the hands of a producer? How do I figure out how to get this made? Well, this is going to sound so basic, but if you know somebody who knows somebody, chances are if they like you, that first person in your know somebody will reach out to someone else on your behalf, right? And that's how I get scripts. If unless there's an agent or manager calling me, if you're like, well, how do you get scripts that aren't coming from an agent or manager? I'm like, it's coming from my friends or my acquaintances or my network, who have read something and they're like, this needs to see Denise, or someone reaches out and says there's an emerging writer who I love or that I've mentored for years and I'm trying to have them meet new people. I mean, both of my editors from Insecure, like literally randomly just reached out and connected me with two aspiring producers that have assisted them. And they were like, would you meet with them? Right. So networking is truly one of the things that moves the needle here. And this is why I say Curie letters don't matter, because people see those emails, they don't know who you are, and they just go, move it on, right? Unless there's like this crazy passionate part of your letter where you're trying to find some connection to that person, chances are they don't read it because they don't have the time. But you know what they have the time for? When their friend or their acquaintance or their executive friend calls them up and says, I have someone I want you to meet, or I have something I want you to read, you're going to lean in because it's a quid pro quo thing. It's like, I want this person to answer my calls next time I turn around and have something that I need them to do for me, right? So that's how networking works here. I know it sounds a little bit of like nepotism, but it's not, because at least I think of my connections that I've made, and none of them are my family members. None of them are people who owe me anything, but good people like to help and work with good people. It's why mentorship is important, and finding yourself a mentor of someone who is established in this industry, because them co-signing on your behalf will take you that much farther, whether it's that recommendation for graduate school, whether it's that recommendation for a job or an internship, or whether it's like, hey, you have a script and you want to and I think it's good, and you want to help me you want help to get it in the hands of someone. Well, that mentor can do that for you, right? So that's another thing to take advantage of as being a student, is to find a mentor. And that's the reason why, because you're like, well, how do I expand my network? I don't know anybody. Well, that's when you, again, take advantage of the student status and go to film festivals, go to places where the industry is. There's Tribeca in New York. There's so many things that are very local, whether you realize it or not, that exposes you to the people who are in the inner workings of this industry. And it's up to you to figure out how to get to know them and get to know you. And I always like to say, don't ever pitch when you meet someone. Don't ever say, hey, can I get a job? Because again, they don't still know you yet. But what you can say is, can I have coffee? Can I join you on a Zoom for 20 minutes? Can I ask you some questions? Can you help me with this? And once they get to know you and get to understand who you are, the things you want to do, then that follow-up of, can you read my script? Can you help co-sign this thing? They're going to go out of their way to do so because they like you. They like you and they believe in you. Not because they met you in an elevator and you gave them a 5-minute elevator pitch. They don't know you from left or center. So it's just, I like to be very honest, and that's just what I've seen. And, I think it's not lost on me how many careers I've seen become successful, mostly starting from there, through someone they knew that had someone else that they knew. And, and it's always random in that way, which is why I said no one's journey is alike. Everyone starts out very differently, and that's usually why.
Do you have any suggestions in terms of places to find internships and jobs? I usually tell students entertainmentcareers.net is a really great site. But there's mediabistro.com, there's several. Is there anything that stands out to you?
No, those are the ones I was using. I was using Mandy.com, which I believe is still a service. They usually have actually a lot of great production experience. So like if you're doing set PA work or looking for assistant work, entertainmentcareers.net is amazing. What I also would do, because it's just not on a general website, but every studio network has their own job HR listings, right? So like I got the ABC internships because actually I started with the daytime one, but I was on the ABC jobs website because every studio has their own website where those jobs aren't usually a listserv to other places. So you have to go to their website. And they would post all of their internships there, you know? And so I would literally, when I talked about the paid internships, I'm like, no joke, I was probably applying to 34 places, 30 to 40 places a semester, but it was because I was just doing a huge trove of what was out there. And what's unfortunate is that there is no one-stop shop, but what I do know that also adds to the research part is that, again, your school, whether it's the Magner Center, the TV Film Center, or even the Feinstein program, or even the undergrad film program, each of them actually have a career center. Each of them actually are facilitating internships and opportunities that are coming in, sometimes specifically for BC students, right? So I think, you know, you should explore everything, because it's not going to be enough to just apply to one or two places and hope that someone calls you back, right? You have to be eager. You have to kind of go after it. And again, the other part of that is like the networking part. All of these film festivals actually take internships, by the way. They always actually have. I've met so many people at Sundance who are working there as a ticket holder person, and they took that job because it got them at Sundance where they can network, even though they have a job that they have to go work a couple hours to. But they were like, I got a job at Sundance that's taken me 3 weeks, but is allowing me to be at this festival and be in the mix. So it's like being smart about those opportunities in that way, even if it's, like I said, not on a random website that you can find. It's just like really looking at all of the entry points into this town and what that looks like.
Somebody's asking what's the difference between being an executive producer and a producer?
Ooh, good question. So here's a fun fact. There's a lot of different types of producing, and I think it's people think of producer as just like one position, right? The first thing to really know, though, is that it's very different for TV than film. In film, there is a producer, right? They are the produced by credit. They're the ones who get nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars, right? Like that is the holy grail of producing. It's like you are the producer of this feature. And then in features, you often see an executive producer. Well, who is that? Well, sometimes it's the executive at a company who helped develop the project. Sometimes it's the financiers, people who put money in. Sometimes it's the talent who said yes to the project but wanted producer credit. So that's really the film side of it. That's very dry and cut because that's just how it is. But ironically, I talked about a line producer. There's still a line producer in films, but sometimes they don't get the prestigious producer credit. They're just known as a line producer. Now in TV, it's very different, and the reason why that is as I think most of you know, TV is really a writer's business. It's really a writer's medium where writers are actually the ones who really lead the creative, whereas in features, it's the director. So in TV, you actually tend to see more producing credits, and you see credits that are like co-producer, supervising producer, and you're like, what does this all mean? Well, a good chunk of them are actually producers who are writers in the writer's room for that project, but have gotten their career to a status where they're able to actually get producing credit because they're now stepping up and doing a little bit more work. So some producer credits in TV you see are going to be the writers. Some producer credits you see in TV are actually managers who are managing the creators of that project and helped produce it. Like, for example, 3 Arts, who is Issa's management company, are also producers on Insecure because they helped her develop and bring that pitch in and sold it with her. They were actually the first people attached to the project. So some credits you see are managers. And then on the other side, you have people like me who I consider myself to be a non-writing producer. I'm not a writer. I'm not a director. I'm not necessarily an executive at a studio or network, but I truly am just a producer. And it was really interesting because it's a position that doesn't exist on every show in TV world. And so it's still kind of a newer thing because historically it was like, well, who knows a non-writing producer in TV because it's all about, there's enough writer producers already. But, I really work in tandem with our line producer on Insecure, who also happens to be an EP in his own right. So as a line producer or a UPM, you can work your career up to a point where you start to get that EP credit as well. But it's not necessarily where you start at. And then the last type of producer I'll add is that in post, there's always a post producer who, like on the TV side, is given co-producer, producer credit. A post producer, even on a film, can get a co-producer credit. So it's a position based on credits that is really hard to nail down because, as you can hear, that there's many different ways to get a producer credit. But what I found is that they are very specific and intentional about what type of credit it is and what type of project it is, right? So it's really hard to just be a blanket statement of be like, I'm a producer of everything. And once you get to the TV film level, it does get much, much more specific.
Do you have any advice about how somebody could take a web series to TV?
You make a good web series and hope that people see it. I mean, it's tough because I would say even if you made a web series, it doesn't automatically get you a TV show, right? So there's still that work and that part of, well, just because you did a web series, have you thought about what the TV version is? Because chances are someone's not going to come to you and just say, let's put this web series on TV. There's going to be a part in which they redevelop it, or expand on it to fit the TV format. So always be prepared as if you are doing something for the web that you hope to later become a TV show or a film, that you spend the time thinking ahead and making sure you know what that version looks like. Because if someone is interested, but you haven't thought about it yet, chances are they're not going to do it for you. So it's like doing a web series, knowing what that next step would be and strategically how to get it in front of as many people as possible, whether it's festivals or hosting your own screenings, etc.
Another question somebody asked was, how do you convince executives to take risks for a story you work on when they're hesitant?
I'm dealing with that now. You realize there's always going to be people who are hesitant, right? This, for better or worse, this town and the way this business is ran is very risk adverse. It's just historically so, which means they tend to not, if not often, not take all the risks that you would think, right? A show like Insecure and the people involved in that is so rare in order to be set up and thinking of the huge risks that HBO take in supporting that. And it turned out for the better, right? But that's not always the case. And so it's a case-by-case basis. And it's also down to the studio exec. And again, like I mentioned earlier, so personality driven and network driven, right? So you might have a studio exec, regardless of the company. You could have two different execs at the same company. One who is more lenient in taking the risks and betting on talent, and you might have one that is much more conservative and scared to lose their job, and they don't want to take that risk. So it really is, the roll of the dice, and always about the people involved in that project. So again, the projects I work on, no one's the same, right? I'm working with a different writer on this and a different executive on this one. So it's a case by case basis, but where I stand in it all is making sure I'm advocating for the good of the project and always trying to make sure that if there is resistance, that they're able to see it from our side and or trust us as producers to be able to manage that expectation and that risk, even if they're the ones who are financing it. It's my job at the end of the day to deliver and to execute. Otherwise, I failed. I can't convince someone to take a risk and then completely be like, "Oh, you were right. Sorry, we messed up." So that's how I approach it. And again, there's no right or wrong answer to it. It's one of those things that I think is just the nature of this town and that you'll forever face, because that's just how people work. They're spending $20 million on something. Like, sometimes they're not often open to being like, sure, yeah, hire whoever you want, so it's always going to be a challenge. I look at producing as one of those things where you just got to go get the experience, right? It's a couple of different folds. It's taking the experience levels to where, like I said, you're learning about production, you're out there networking, maybe you're trying to get an assistant job to a producer or at a production company. Like, you're truly just trying to get your foot in the door whatever way you can find it. But then on the other side to that, there's nothing, like we were talking about creating content earlier, there's nothing stopping you from producing something, right? Like, I think of when I was at BC, and I always joke about my undergrad thesis film because I had to direct it, but I'm like, I don't really love, it didn't come out great, but I produced the hell out of that short. You can't tell me I didn't, because I was much more embracing that side of it than being like, I have to direct this. Okay, here's my shot list. But within that, I also produced, 4 other BC student thesis films because they all needed producers, and I was like, I need more producers producing experience, right? So there's nothing stopping you from putting yourself in a position to just figure it out. And it's probably the best way about producing, because again, there's no roadmap to it. It's about problem solving. It's about learning by experience. It's the reason why I freelanced for as many years as I did, because in that amount of time and the 100+ projects and sets I ended up finding on myself, whether it was a $500 music video or a $100,000 web series, all of those experiences added to my producing portfolio, right? There was things that I had never produced before, but I was like, I can figure it out because I'm a producer, and that's my job, is to figure out how to do this. So I would say, yes, find the entry level foot in the door jobs, but at the same time, look at all of the ways and opportunities in which you can just do it and put yourself in the midst of it and say, you know what would it look like if I go and produce a friend's short film for a day and just like experiment? There's no reason not to, because again, the pressure is not high. You'd rather do that for a friend's film for $1,000 than do that when you have a $10 million feature film opportunity. You don't want to do it then. So, baby steps, and just know that, like, I personally believe any experience and opportunity is well worth the risk, because you just don't know where that is going to go from there.
Thank you so much for that. Again, a lot of really great valuable here. So Denise, I want to thank you for your time. I know you have to get going, you have another meeting, but I think this was really fantastic. I mean, you shared a lot of really amazing advice, your experiences, and I hope this inspires a lot of the students that were here today.
Thank you guys. No, it's a pleasure. Thank you guys for such wonderful questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to everybody, but this is wonderful, and I'm accessible. I'm out there in the real world, but I'm just so proud of, to be honest, the opportunities that BC gives to students, because I think people tend to think of college sometimes as a burden versus like college as an opportunity, and so that's why I keep stressing that. I'm like, while you guys are students, take advantage. And sometimes, as much as you've heard that I've done, sometimes I'm like, did I take advantage of everything? Because I know I took advantage of certain things, but there is just still so much. And again, when you guys come out, that type of support is not there as an adult, as a postgraduate. There's alumni centers, but they don't really do I think the level of support that the college provides to the active students. So that's why I'm just stressing of taking advantage of that as much as you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Magna Center is going to be open throughout the summer. So we'll be closed on Fridays, but we will be open during the summer, and we have other workshops and events and whatnot. If you need your resume looked at, mock interviews, we're here to help you with all of it. So can students connect with you, I guess, through LinkedIn? It would be maybe the most ideal.
Yeah, no, LinkedIn is great. I check it pretty frequently. Instagram, any of those messaging places. I think Reform Media Group has a website, or it used to, but there's ways. There's things that are out there.
Excellent. Great. Thank you so much again, Denise. This was fantastic. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Yeah, we did record this. We'll have this available on our Magna Center YouTube channel. If you're not following that, please do.
Make sure to check out the My Career tab on the BC Navigator app, where you can track your career progress based on the amount of credits you've earned, stay updated on upcoming events from the Magna Center, and watch our videos for insight and advice on your career field.